Good morning. When I was first approached about being the speaker this morning, someone had put this title in place that says, Human Factors, is it relevant? So my answer to that is yes, but we have a PR problem. My other answer was, that's not the title of my talk. But then I thought about it, and I thought, well, maybe I can tie that in. I can talk about the relevance of human factors, and I can talk about other things, and I can bring it together. So I left it. And so I don't have to convince you that it's relevant. I'm here with a whole team of people who work in human factors or who are studying human factors, so you know it's relevant. But today I want you to think about it. I want to talk about what it is, how we define it, and how you share it with others. I want to talk about what it means to you and your career, and how you can embrace all of these changes that are going to be coming your way. Also, how can you promote and support human factors, and how are you going to leave your impact in this field? So this is like my traditional bio slide, and probably a lot of you know me, but this was my human factors career, and it seems pretty straightforward, but careers are never like that. When you put up your bio slide, it looks like linear and easy, but things aren't that simple, right? The actual lines of work are more convoluted and ziggy-zaggy, and there's a lot of things that aren't included. I like to include a little bit of personal, so there's my 4 adult children when we went on vacation, and my multi-poo. Her name is Carly Simon. So I went to college, and I got a degree in psychology. I have a master's degree, and that was before I knew what human factors was. I didn't even know that was a career path. I didn't know it was an option. But I will say, if I look back over things in my life, I can see how it was always going to be a very good fit for me. I have worked as a YMCA camp counselor, as a waitress, as a bartender. I had multiple jobs at the post office. I delivered mail. I was a clerk. I was a window clerk. I trained people in customer service. And I bring all that up because human factors was important to me before I even knew what it was. So, like I said, what I want to talk about today is I want us to reflect on the field that we are either entering right now or the one that we're in. And I want us to always be reminded that we have all of these choices. You always have a choice every step of the way, and you shouldn't ever feel trapped in a job or a domain or a field, right? You can always move. I did not do a good example of that because, as you saw, I was at Compact/HP for 17 years. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it when it's right for you. So I want us to think about that. And I want to share some of my experiences and lessons learned that might help you along the way. And if not, maybe they'll be somewhat interesting. But I want us to think about changes that are coming our way and also a little bit about our legacies. And if you're just starting your career, you might be thinking, legacy? What? I just want to get a job. But honestly, that stuff starts early, right? Even as students, you're probably involved in student chapters. You're probably mentoring other people. So I think, creating your legacy is not something that happens when you're only at the end of your career. It happens all throughout your career. And so at some point, we need to think about that. You need to think about how to give back. And you also have to think about how to help the future researchers that are coming behind us. So how do we define human factors? So this is always interesting to me, and not because I don't know what it is or how to define it, because if we're promoting its relevance, then we need to be able to explain it. And I don't know if you guys have all had this experience, but I have had this experience so many times of trying to explain to people what human factors is, what we do, why we do it. It's very difficult to people outside of the field, right? We use a lot of words to talk about how we understand people who interact with products and systems, and we look at cognitive and physical limitations, and we apply this now. It's a lot. It's a lot to explain, and it's hard to explain. And I think even within our groups, right, we think, what is it? Is it a research practice? Is it ergonomics, right? What is it? Is it just a career path, or is it a science, right? And I think it's different depending on who you are and where you are in your career. When I was at HP, I used to tell people that I was the psychologist in the engineering and design group, and my job was to observe people interact with prototypes and then give advice about how to make products better. And that was the best I could do to simplify it at the time. But maybe that worked for me. But, think about what you're doing and how you can explain it to people, and even in a bigger sense, how we can explain human factors to people who are not human factors people. So I brought up being a bartender. So I will say, as a bartender, I didn't know what human factors was. But I knew that things that were used more frequently needed to be nearby, right? So when you set up your station as a bartender, you have like the main liquors that you use, and you have ice here, and you have the main glasses. You might have a blender here in the summertime, but in the wintertime, you can move it over here. If they're having a drink special, and it's for a bourbon drink, and bourbon's way down there, you want to move that drink and all those ingredients to be closer to you. I was always the type of person who would go in and scan the environment, look at how people were working, watch how they were walking over there 100 times, and think, why don't they move that over here? So I love bar rescue, by the way. But, I think things like this made me realize that I was always kind of a human factors person. I was always doing this. And when I try to explain things to people, I like to use these kinds of examples because it kind of makes sense, especially to bartenders. But I think it's good to think about, and it's good to think about how to explain it when you move into different places and different domains. So I have here some industries that are impacted, especially in Houston, right? So what industries are impacted? We all know this stuff, right? We know that we have broad impact. And in this conference alone, you can see how many industries are represented. If you just read over the list of talks and the posters, it's fascinating to me. I can't believe that we have the ability to study airplane controls and spacesuits and servers and computers and input devices and hazardous work environments and displays and emergency medical procedures and software, robotics. It's kind of fascinating, right? But I think sometimes as professionals, we tend to get stuck, like we're in one company or we're in one research field. And I think you forget about the wider world of human factors. So I think it's always good to think about that and to attend conferences, because that's when you are reminded. Any time I go to a big conference, I'm reminded about how vast this field is and how much bigger it is than the stuff that I've been working on. And it's nice to think about the ways that it contributes to the world. So, believe it or not, the way or time when I discovered human factors, I was actually working at the post office. And like I said, I have done many different jobs at the post office. I got my master's degree in psychology. I was doing training, and I was trying to figure out what to do and where to go. So when I was there, I learned two things that ultimately led me to human factors. So I'll tell you about those. One thing is you can't fight a system that doesn't bend. So I was training at this, I had been a window clerk, but then I was training people in customer service, right? So you have these rules and you have this union management sort of butting heads kind of thing. And I'm not against unions. My grandfather was in the union. I thought it was illegal to cross a picket line growing up. I didn't even, so. But, that's the way it was presented to me. But anyway, there was a lot of just fighting, and people had become so entrenched that the rules were applied in a ridiculous way. So you would have a lunchtime and 2 break times, the window clerks. And if they didn't take it at their prescribed time, they lost it. So nobody would run a business this way. If you're up here and there's 20 people in line, wouldn't you say, well, I'll take my break after I get the line down, right? That's normal, rational behavior. But you couldn't do that. The supervisor would come up and say, it's break time. and the person would put the little thing up, and everybody in line would be like, my tax dollars, So it was a crazy-making system, because, and that was just one example of the kind of stuff that went on. So even if you had a good and understanding boss, they felt like they were tied by the rules, and they had to abide by the rules very, very strictly, and there was no just flexibility in how things were approached. So another thing that happened, so two things happened simultaneously. I met somebody who worked in software, and I'll come back to that. So there was a new point of sale system that was brought into the post office, right? So, since I was doing training, I was training people on how to use this, right? And so the first thing you notice is like, what the heck? So it's set up and you have to log in, that makes sense. But then there's a screen and then another screen, it's asking you all about mailing packages. And they do mail packages, but what's the most common thing they do? Or at that time, now it's different, but at that time, sell a book of stamps. So they had to go through multiple levels to get to their most frequent task, which was sell a book of stamps. And so I was like, what? Who designed this and why did they do this? Why didn't they talk to any of the window clerks? And so I found out that what they had done was talk to subject matter experts, which were people in upper management who at one time in their life had been window clerks. So so I don't know if that was the decision of the company or if that was the decision of the post office with all their fear of rules and, making people take their breaks at the right time and all that stuff. So it was another crazy thing. Like, you're trying to train people how to be good in customer service, and they're like, yeah, but they won't let us move that over here, and they won't let us keep going when there's a long line, and they gave us this terrible system that won't let us sell a book of stamps, So all of this was just crazy, and I was like, I have to get out of this place. But now I'm going back to, I met a person in software, and he said, don't you have a master's degree in psychology? And I said, yeah. And he goes, do you know we're bringing in a bunch of psychologists to industry because they're helping us make things better? And I was like, tell me more. And so he told me about what human factors people did in the software domain, and I was like, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, I know exactly why this is needed. I know what this is. So I started reading textbooks and following people. This is how old I am, back on listservs and things like that. So, I just learned all about it and started networking like crazy. And I eventually got an interview at Compaq. And, we had to, as you do a lot of interviews, you have to give a presentation about what you do or your experience with human factors. So you can imagine what my talk was. It's all about the post office. And Mira was nice enough to take a chance on me, and that's how I ended up starting my career in human factors. So thank you, post office. So your stories are probably a little bit more traditional than that. Maybe not. Maybe there's some of you can come up later and tell me that you have very crazy stories too. But most of you are in school, you're studying human factors, so you're starting from a different place. So I think that's really exciting because you can think about where you want to go and all of the different options that are available to you. Recently, the National HFES did some interviews with professionals, and they asked people for 3 words that define themselves. And these are some of the words that came up. So I can't even see them without my glasses. Let's see. Teacher, researcher, leader, engineer, innovator. Some other words that came up were scientist, practitioner, mentor. So how do you see yourself? Maybe you are the person who wants to teach the next generation of professionals. Maybe you want to do research that keeps people safe or makes products better or helps the medical field or helps people get to space. Or maybe you want to be somebody who innovates, find that unmet need and make something that's brand new and not thought about yet. So we have a panel this afternoon talking about emerging technology, and I think that's super exciting, right? We don't have everybody here, but what we do have is people talking about all different kinds of things that are new. And that's what's exciting about our field. It's not like the 4 domains that I put on the slide earlier are the ones we're stuck with, right? We have people talking about autonomous vehicles, and I've seen things about exoskeletons and artificial intelligence and security and VR. Like, it's really exciting to me, and it shows that HF does have relevance if we're able to embrace and study those new emerging technologies. I'm trying to watch my time, and I can't see it without putting my glasses on. So when you're considering all of that, just remember that you have a lot of choices, and you don't have to decide it all right now. You can be both. You can be a researcher and an innovator, a teacher and a scientist, a leader and an engineer, or you can have multiple things that you do. And you don't have to have it all mapped out in advance, right? Just be open to exploring your different options along the way. So where you want to go is going to change throughout your career. But in order to define where you want to go, you have to understand really who you are and what's important to you in your career. And you have to define the relevance in your career, right? You have to decide what's going to be relevant for you and what's right. And you need to check in and see, am I in the right place? And if not, what's missing and how do I get there? So right now, you could just be missing a job. And that's fair, right? You know, we all need a job. But maybe you are comfortable and you have the chance to explore other options. So, you know, some of the things we talk about a lot at HFES is whether people want to go into industry or academia, and sometimes they try one and they like, yeah, no, that's not right for me, and they go back in the other direction. Another thing that might happen as you start your career is you may be pressured or feel like the only way to move up in a company is to be a manager. And I will tell you, at a lot of companies, that's really not true now. They have technical career paths. So you can be a researcher and move up in the same way like manager, director, VP, and just become a master or a fellow or whatever. And you can do that, continue to be in charge of research, but just be more strategic and have a larger scope. So you don't always have to make that leap over into management. And then another thing that Camille told me, she's not here today, but she told me a story about, she was the professor at U of H Clear Lake. She had started that program, which helped a lot of people get ready for industry. And she was doing a lot of teaching and realized that she really missed doing research. And she wanted to do more impactful research that helped people with their lives and safety. And she wasn't getting that. And then she told me, this is her version, but she said she met Nick. And Nick was doing lots of research and was tired of chasing grants or whatever it is and wanted to teach and be more involved with students. You need to go to UH Clear Lake. You know, so she worked really hard to get, you know, she got her PhD, she got this job, she started a program, she did all of this stuff, and then she said, this isn't right for me. So it doesn't have to happen at the beginning, it can happen along the way. She's now at A&M, she's very happy. So just keep in mind that all these choices are not choices you make once, they're choices you make throughout. So when you think about who you are and where you want to be, it's important to discover this, and it's going to grow and change with time. And so for me, this is where I started. I started as a researcher, and all I wanted was to be a good researcher, right? That's all I could think about. I was new. I was coming in with a master's degree in psychology. I didn't have a ton of experience, and I was really excited just to learn about being a researcher and do a good job and, you know, do things for the company. But then eventually, after a while, that was boring for me, and I wanted to do more with innovation. I wanted to be in new product development. I wanted to change, and I had the opportunity to do that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But also, I discovered along the way that I really loved being a mentor, and being a mentor gave me something that my career couldn't give me. So I was a mom, I had 4 kids, but that's completely different, you know. So dealing with your own children is different than dealing with, you know, young professionals. And I really enjoyed it. And I got involved with Houston HFES, I got involved with U of H Clear Lake, and I've never looked back, and I love doing that. And I really made that part of the culture at End to End also. And then finally, what I like to be and what I'm aspiring to be is a leader. And that's something that is different for everybody, and it changes over time. But that's something that I continue to work on. So John Maxwell, author of Developing the Leader Within You, says this about leadership. And there are many different ways to lead. You can be a leader in your field, you can blaze the path for others, you can lead a team of people, you can lead strategic initiatives. At HP, I led a team of people, I led some strategy, I led some big projects. And then starting my own business with Monica gave me a whole new way to lead. And sometimes leading means doing the jobs that you don't want to do, right? And it also means learning things that maybe you're not that interested in, right? So you can grow a new part of the company. But you know, leading is showing the way. And I think sometimes people forget that because it's not just doing the stuff you love, it's also doing the hard stuff. So I'm going to tell you just a little more about my story and the changes and challenges and lessons learned along the way. So what motivated me? Okay, well, you know, let's be real. Money matters. I mean, this is a lucrative career, and that's okay, right? I was a single mother with 4 kids. I needed a salary and I needed benefits, right? That's probably why I stayed working for the government for so long when I shouldn't have, right? But, so yeah. And I mean, if you're at that stage, hey, that's fine. You know, I mean, go out, make that money, pay off those loans, do what you need to do. I mean, I get it. So, but what I knew about myself is that I really enjoyed helping people. And I knew that I liked listening to people. One of the skills of bartending, right, is listening to everybody's stories. And I liked hearing stories. I was curious about people. I liked hearing what was going on in their lives. And also, I liked making things better, as I've said before. And every job that I had, I tried to improve the environment or the process. And, you know, sometimes I wasn't able to do anything, but I tried. And I also knew that from college that I really had little desire for deep, in-depth scientific research. Like, I've worked with professors gathering data. I even worked in rat lab at UHCL, which shows that I can do anything. Like, after I did rat lab, I was like, man, I can do anything if I can do this. But I also worked in a hospital doing biofeedback and tracking subjective improvements. And I knew that I enjoyed interacting with the people. I knew I enjoyed studying how to make things better for people, and I liked quick changes. I was always the person to jump in, try it, see how it goes, you know, make some more changes, right? So I really had the mindset for working in human factors. And then, you know, I got this job at Compaq. I was going to work on websites and software. I was going to go in. I was going to study people. I was going to make these recommendations, and people were going to do them. And that was going to be my new life. So if you guys aren't laughing about that, you probably should be, because any of you who have been in business, and sometimes you're super lucky and you go in and it's not like that, but there's a lot of things that were not exactly as I pictured. So number one, you enter this new world and it's got its own culture and acronyms. So many acronyms. Like, mind blown. I'd go into a meeting and I'd be like, are they even speaking English? Like, and then they'd be talking about fourth quarter coming up and ending in September, and I'm like, who ends a quarter on October 31st? Like, what world is this, you know? So I'd come out of meetings and I'd be like, what does this mean? And then I'd go this other way. What does this mean? I didn't want to overwhelm one person with the, you know, length of things that I didn't know. So you go in there and you're just sort of like, yikes. But you have to learn the culture. And, you know, I started as an internal consultant. And so what's interesting about that is you don't own the research, right? You do, it'll come in handy because I'm a consultant now. But anyway, you do the work, you present the work, and then it's gone. So sometimes your results are implemented, and then sometimes you don't know what happened. But the bad thing about it is you weren't even at the meetings to advocate for the end user, right? You were a consultant. Even though you were still internal, you weren't invited to the meetings. But then even later on, as I was invited to the meetings and I was embedded in a team, you can be overruled for so many reasons. Like it takes too much time, it costs too much, there's supply chain issues, we just can't do that. It makes a product too fat from the design team. Or our competitors are doing it, so we're doing it too. My favorite. So what I would say, the other sort of shocking thing to me, especially in a big company, is that human factors and the user-centered design process is not always an integrated process. So if you work somewhere where that is an integrated process, yay, you're so lucky, because what you have to do is all the time, you have to explain it, you have to teach it, you have to tell people about it, you have to convince them why we only tested this many people. You know, you have to over and over again, you have to explain what it is, and you have to sell it. So this is what another surprising thing, right? You're a salesperson, you're a marketing person, you're like, what? How did this happen? I was supposed to be doing research. But, you know, in human factors, you're always a little bit of a salesman, right? Even if you're in academia, you're trying to sell your research so you can get grant money, right? We always have to know how to sell. And in the corporate world, there's always change, right? You have to be able to tell the new people coming in what it is, and you have to know how to talk to different people, and you have to be able to say, explain it to an engineer, or explain it to a designer, or explain it to a product manager or project manager. Like, there's just different people who have different ways of being incentivized by their bosses, and you have to understand what that is and also what language they speak. So those are really important skills, and it all has to do with sales and marketing kind of personality, which really I didn't think I had, but is something you have to learn. So this is from the book, The Gifts of Imperfection. And I like to think about connection, and I want to talk about the importance of it. And as you're starting, it's really important to forge connections. And this is inside the company and outside of the company. So you want to find your people. You know, you want to find your people who understand you at work, and then you want to also find the people you're going to have to work with, because you need those allies, right? Because a lot of times, it shouldn't be this way, but a lot of times you're giving research results and you're fighting for the end user. You know, even the words I use, fighting for the end user, right? Because it feels like that, and you need allies who say, yeah, she's right, you know, I watched that, and that's true, and we need to do this. And you also need those people who are your advocates, who support you when you're not in the room and say, hey, you know, you better bring in Christy's team because this is a mess, you know, and no, you don't need to be doing that, right? So you need to find those people and know who they are. And you'll find some mentors, you'll find some advocates, you'll find people to mentor, and maybe even some work friends. And you have to think about that inside work and outside work. Today we're at a conference, right? And, you know, if you look around, we're doing what we always do. We all sit with the people we know, right? So we sit with our people we work with, the people we go to school with, right? And we don't tend to mingle. So I'd encourage you today to at least try to meet at least one person who's outside of your cohort, right? Because we need that. We need to mentor. We need to connect, and we need to network. And if it wasn't for networking, I would have never had that job, that initial job. So it's really important. So the first connections I think you need to find are what I call your tribe, and that's other researchers. And if you are a lone researcher, you need to find that outside or in other parts of the company. When we moved from that central consulting group into separate product groups because of a reorg, all of us researchers were now what I call lone wolves, but we would meet every 2 weeks so we could help each other, and we could commiserate and, you know, talk about, you know, how bad our teams were for not understanding us and things like that, right? So you need that. You need that camaraderie, and, you know, sometimes you just need somebody else to bounce ideas off of. And if you're the only researcher in a group of designers or engineers or whatever, you know, it's really hard. And especially if you're brand new, you don't have the background and, you know, past experience to show, right? Because, you know, you don't have past failures to bring up, right? You're just fighting the fight, and you're young, and, you know, so it can be hard. So keep growing that internal network and make your connections. And finally, I talked about how I want to talk about shaking things up. And sometimes this is good, sometimes it's not, but sometimes when you first come in, you're a new set of eyes. And so we've all been doing things the exact same way for all these years, and you get blinders, right? You don't even realize that what you're doing is like a really stupid process because you've always done it that way. So sometimes people are open to that. Sometimes being new, you can come in and say, we should do da-da-da-da. It's hard. It's hard to tell people that, but I think it's something you can do. And if you have allies, if you've already found your tribe and your advocates, right, that's really helpful. And sometimes it's a terrible, immovable system, like I've mentioned before, and if so, you may not be in the right place, And sometimes in newer companies, it's easier, right, because their processes are not as entrenched and they're kind of easier to shift and move. So, use your people, be humble, be innovative, and collaborate. So, talking about shaking things up. So even when you're making positive changes, any change is uncomfortable. Recently, we all moved from the Google suite to Microsoft, and anybody at end-to-end can tell you how extremely unhappy I have been these past 2 weeks trying to get this all figured out. So change always brings discomfort. This is Arnold Bennett from The Great Adventure. But one thing you can be sure of, there's always change, right? Just in our field, there's new fields, there's new technology, there's always something to look at. In the corporate world, there's layoffs and mergers and acquisitions and reorgs. Change is constant. So one change I want to talk about, because people ask me about it all the time, is the emergence of UX research. So to me, if you're a practitioner in a field, that's more system safety focused, UX researcher might not be a thing. And even in some tech industries now, they still call people by human factors titles. But a while back, everybody started becoming UX researchers. And now if you look for jobs, you'll find more jobs looking for UX researchers than looking for human factors researchers. So this may not be the right job for you anyway, but if it is, you really need to think about it. And the emergence of UX research is something we should think about as the human factors field. So I started looking up all of these definitions, trying to understand, is it really that different, right? And, there's a lot in common, right? You want to, both groups of people, right? We're basically the same people in maybe with different focuses. But they want to observe users, they want to understand them, they want to do iterative testing, they want to improve experiences, right? It's all the same. So in the interest of embracing change and new technology, I asked ChatGPT what the difference is between human factors and UX research. And the only difference ChatGPT came up with is that the human factors UX does all these things, human factors does all these things, and human factors also optimizes human performance and safety. So that could be true, but I almost think it's a bit more than that, right? I think if I was called a UX researcher, I'd still want my product to be safe, and I might have to look at human performance, right? But I think what's happening with UX research is they may not even know that there is a depth of research available to them. So, human factors does the hard stuff. We do the hard research, and there's all this data out there available. And, we have to think about why people don't even know about this and think about how we can bridge that gap. So, why does it matter? It matters because it's aligned with human factors. It matters because of the jobs we're looking for. And it also, for the visibility we need. So I think, admittedly, UX research, it has a lot of problems, right? There's a whole lot of confusion between UX design and UX research. Is it UX or is it UI? There's an influx of people into the field who don't know what human factors is and maybe don't know much about research either. But I have to say, the very first time that I met someone in the field at a research conference who did not know what human factors was at UPA. So this was before it was UXPA, it was UPA. And I looked it up, that was in 2011. So this is not like a recent change. This has been happening for a while. So there's also the issue of hiring managers knowing they need UX research, but not knowing what it was, what it is, what the qualifications should be, not understanding what level of knowledge is needed from somebody. And there's also this tendency to hire everybody as seniors and give them responsibility to start a new team when they just are brand new to the field, and it's kind of a little bit scary. So Sheryl Sandberg says to take a seat at the table. So this is what I hear from everybody, is that UX research has given us a seat at the table. So you should always take a seat at the table when it's offered, right? You don't hide in the background. But with the popularity of UX, now we see there's UX managers, directors, even VPs. They're over research and design, so it has given us visibility and maybe the possibility to advocate for the science of human factors or to make user-centered design a standard process. So we have this elevated now seat, right? So we just have to figure out, how do we make use of that? So I've talked about lots of different changes that are going to happen and things that have happened to human factors. And another thing I come up against is this emergence of new research. So, there was a time where I was asked to suddenly do a lot of ethnographic research. But what we had been doing was contextual inquiry, right? So what is ethnographic research? What does that mean? Well, really, what it turned out to be is anthropology. Back when I came into the field, a lot of psychologists were coming in and working in human factors. So when the big rise of ethnography in industry had to do with a bunch of anthropologists figuring out they could do the same thing, right? So how was it different? I didn't know. So the company sent me to this day-long intensive workshop at a market research conference. And guess what? It was contextual inquiry. It was the exact same thing, just repackaged and renamed. The way it's done in industry is the exact same thing we've been doing all of this time. So what I would say is, don't be afraid of new methodologies when they come up. Do some research and, learn. I mean, that's the exciting thing about this job, is we get to learn. The good thing about ethnographic research is I talked about that time when I really wanted to innovate, and I was able to take this and do that, right? I was able to go to all kinds of places and get out of the lab, and getting out of the lab was a big deal, right? So I was able to go to hospitals and go to schools and go to offices and go to coffee shops and just libraries and warehouses. I was able to travel to China multiple times. It was really, really exciting, and I was able to do innovative things. So to say I embraced the change was an understatement. I loved learning what ethnography was. That was awesome. And so other things that have happened like that for me is like the emergence of design thinking. So it was sort of crazy making that we had this human factors team at HP. We're doing all this work, and all of a sudden, everybody's having design workshops, like, design thinking. And I'm like, okay, what? And so you go to one, and it's like, that's what we do. That's user-centered design. What are you talking about? We already do that. We already have a whole team doing that. And it was just going all around the company, and they're talking about hiring all these people. And I'm like, hello, we're already here. It was maddening. So I thought, okay. So I go to a webinar about design thinking. And, basically what the person said is, this is user-centered design. This is what I call it. People are mistakenly thinking that design thinking starts in the room with the sticky notes. But design thinking really starts with research. You do research, you get ideas. Then you go to the room with the sticky notes. And then you go through some ideas. You make some prototypes, you test, you refine, you do it again. And I'm like, but that's what we do, So it's interesting to me how things come up and they're new, but, different, but really not that new. Another one that came up recently is jobs to be done. And admittedly, I have not read the book, so I haven't researched it fully yet. But I remember when it came up, I was like, do we need training on this now? And I watched a really short YouTube type thing, and I'm like, it sounds like they're doing a task analysis, and it sounds like they are saying that we have to consider the jobs people are trying to do when we design products for them.
Insight.
Okay, so And if anybody has read the book, and I'm way off, I'm sorry, but that's where I am with this right now. I'm like, here we go again. And I put diary studies on there because I used to do a bunch of diary studies maybe 10 years ago, and then that was it. They were gone. And now all of a sudden, everybody wants a diary study. I don't know what happened, but diary studies are back. So the good thing about this is you continue to learn, and you have to become an expert. So, I mean, I think this is a little scary. So I talked about how sometimes you come in and it's like you have great data and people are ignoring you, and that's really frustrating. The other thing that happens that's really scary sometimes is you're the expert, and you don't feel like the expert sometimes, especially if you're brand new and you come in and they will say, "What does human factors say?" And you're like, and you can't do that, right? You can't say, well, we only tested 12 people. You can't do that, right? You have to believe in the process, and you have to believe in what you're doing. And to everyone else in that room, you are the expert. So you have to own it. You have to take a seat at that table, and you have to be the expert. And if you don't feel like the expert, keep learning, right? Keep going out there and learning what's new, reading research that's applicable to what you do, stretching yourself in the difficult projects. So become the expert if you don't feel like the expert. And then, to go a little step further, share your expertise. Then you can start on that legacy. So, change. So when is it time to make changes, right? It's necessary, right? It's necessary to initiate change. And I always refer to big changes as leaps of faith. But I think sometimes all you need is a tiny little jump, right? So what happened to me, and the thing that kept me in HP so long, besides not really wanting to uproot the kids, was that every time I was super bored or I was just ready to go, they would give me a new project or open up a new domain for me to study or let me do ethnographic research everywhere, or, sometimes that's what you need. You need a challenge. You need to be excited again. You need to do something else. And maybe you need a bigger stretch project, or you need to manage some people, whatever it is, right? So, and if you can't get it at your company, it's okay to get it at another company, right? That's a little bit more of a bigger leap, but it's okay, right? It's okay to make those changes. You have to think about it and do it when it's time. And one thing I hear a lot is people leave bad bosses. They don't leave companies. And I think that's true to some extent, right? So I've had bad bosses, you've had bad bosses, right? And sometimes you're just like, I have to do anything to get away from this toxic person. But sometimes you have a good boss who's up against an immovable system, right? So I think people leave bad bosses and they leave bad companies. And sometimes they just leave for growth, and that's okay. We want everybody to be fulfilled and happy and doing in their career what they need to be doing. That's what's important. So when it's time to make a change and you feel it and you know it, go for it. I probably should have made a change 2 years before I made my change and opened end to end. And it's been great. I've never looked back. I've never once said, gee, I wish I was back at HP. No. So here's a great quote by Robin Sharma. And I believe this, right? Even when you take those big leaps and they don't always work out, you learn something from them and you move on, and your life is better because of it. So, as you're learning these lessons and you're moving and growing, you need to think about how to give back and how to leave your mark, right? There's so many ways to leave your mark, and it's really different for everybody. So maybe you want to be the expert, maybe you want to be a leader, maybe you want to teach, you want to mentor, you want to give back to the community that gave to you, whether it's HFES or some other community. I think it's great. Maybe you're a really smart leader and you want to write a book. Yay! But publishing is another way to have an impact in the field. So I do think this is from Leaders Eat Last, and I do think when you lead, it's not just about being in charge, it's about showing the way and taking care of people. Taking care of people means sometimes letting them go, and I've had many times where I've had interns at HP who were really great, and we did not have job requisitions, and so I helped them get other jobs. And I stay in touch with people, and I help them get their next job if I have the connections. I think leading is really taking care of people and not thinking of yourself, thinking of your people. So what do I do? How do I become a leader, a mentor? How do I become an expert? So we've talked about this. This is it. It's not that hard. Share your experience, learn and grow. Like, say yes. When people ask you, can you help me with this? Say yes, right? That's how I end up with so many things to do, because I say yes. So I do believe that the best way to find yourself is to give yourself in service to others, and it's going to help you grow, right? So it seems like mentoring might take too much time, or speaking at a conference might take too much time, but it doesn't, and you grow from it. You grow from all of those opportunities if you just say yes. So, how can you give back? So you can become involved with a local university, which is what I did. You can help organize or grow a local chapter. I am currently local chapter chairperson, so anybody want to start a chapter anywhere outside of Houston, let me know. You can volunteer at the national level, or you can be a mentor. There's many different ways to give back, and you have to do what works for you. And this is what worked for me. So I've started working with the Houston chapter of HFES, and then I went on to work with the students at U of H Clear Lake, and I've remained involved there. I was able to innovate and earn some patents along the way. I guest lecture at universities. I've done webinars for HFES. I was involved with HFE Women, and I was awarded Mentor of the Year, which to me was probably the best award I've ever received, right? Because being recognized for something that is who you are, not what you do, is sort of amazing. And so I was also, then later I was president of HFE Women. Right now I am serving as past president. I'm involved in the national level with the Council of Affinity Groups. When I go to the conferences, if they need me, I will be part of the activities on Student Day. So there's so many ways. There's so many ways to do it. And I encourage you to think about how you can branch out, how you can reach out, and how you can grow. So throughout this, I've asked you to think about what human factors means to you, how you want to share it with other people, and to grow and be ready for all the changes that are coming your way. And as you enjoy that conference today, I want you to think about how you can give back to this society, this field, and the future researchers that are going to follow you. And I invite you to connect, right? Connect with me, connect with others, and network. This is the perfect opportunity, so take advantage of it. And I'm going to leave you with this quote, which is often wrongly attributed to Mark Twain, but it's from the book, P.S. I Love You. And I love this quote. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I encourage you to set sail, go forth in your careers, explore, dream, discover, and enjoy the conference.